So have you ever had one of those rejections that just completely knocks the wind out of you know what I mean? Like you poured your heart and soul into something and it just crashes and burns?
Oh, yeah, I've definitely been there a few times. It's rough. But it's interesting because sometimes those tough rejections, they can actually lead to something even better.
That's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the life of J.K. Rowling and how she took those rejections and turned them into a global phenomenon. We've got a full biography, an episode of Empower Your English, and a really insightful interview to help us piece it all together.
So for all of you listening out there, our mission is to understand how Rowling dealt with some incredibly tough personal challenges and still created this amazing world of Harry Potter. It's a story about sticking to your dreams, being resilient, and believing in yourself, even when things are really rough.
It's like finding that secret formula for turning setbacks into huge successes, right? So let's get started. Joanne Kathleen Rowling was born on July 31st, 1965 in Yate, Gloucestershire, England. She had a pretty typical middle-class upbringing, but she always loved reading and writing stories even as a kid.
Yeah, it's pretty clear from the start that she wasn't just reading stories, she was actively creating them. The biography mentions that she'd write stories for her younger sister Diane, so that creative spark was always there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when she was 15, her mom Anne was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or MS. It was a pretty big blow to the family, and it really affected Joanne emotionally. Watching a loved one go through something like that can really change your perspective on life, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. The biography really stresses how much that experience impacted her, especially at such a young age. It forces you to deal with some really tough stuff like vulnerability and loss. I wonder if that's part of what gave her writing such depth later on.
It's really sad. But her mom passed away when Rowling was only 25. You can only imagine how devastating that was.
Hmm.
And on top of that, she was battling with depression. It was a really dark time for her, and writing became a kind of lifeline for her, according to the biography.
It's so interesting how often creativity becomes an outlet when people are going through tough times. For Rowling, writing wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to deal with her grief and maybe find some meaning in everything.
And then a few years later, she became a single mom and was raising her daughter Jessica while dealing with poverty and all the emotional baggage that comes with it. It's crazy to think about that when you see how successful she is now.
The interview actually mentions that she was poor as it is possible to be in modern Britain without being homeless, and she was on government assistance. So when you hear that, it really puts her journey into perspective, all the willpower and determination it took to keep going.
But in the middle of all that, something magical was brewing. The idea for Harry Potter came to her while she was on a train from Manchester to London. Can you imagine? The whole world just popped into her head during a delayed train ride.
What's amazing is that despite all the chaos and hardship in her life, her imagination was still so alive and active. The interview says the idea came to her fully formed, starting with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. It shows how powerful our imagination can be. It's not just an escape from reality, it can actually create something totally new.
Okay, so now she's got this incredible story, but getting it out there wasn't easy at all. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was rejected by 12 publishers.
Can you believe that 12 rejection? I mean, wouldn't most people just give up after that?
I think most people would. It
Right.
really shows how important it is to keep going. For most of us, that many rejections would be crushing.
Yeah.
But she just kept sending her manuscript out because she believed in her story. And finally, in 1996, Bloomsbury Publishing said yes. But even then, they weren't totally convinced. The story goes that the editor's 8-year-old daughter, Alice Newton, absolutely loved the book, and that's what pushed them to publish it. The publisher actually told Rowling to keep her day job.
It's crazy when you think about how successful the books became. It just shows how hard it is to predict what's going to be a hit. Sometimes you got to trust your gut like Rowling did and not let those initial doubts get to you.
And this whole thing is a perfect example of perseverance. Rowling faced rejections, criticism, and being ignored, but she never gave up.
There's a quote from her Harvard commencement speech that the Empower Your English episode highlighted, and it's so relevant here. She said, "It is impossible to live without failing at something, unless you live so cautiously that you might as well not have lived at all, in which case you fail by default." It makes you think about failure differently, doesn't it?
Totally. It's not the end of the world. It's a part of life, and sometimes it's even necessary for growth. It's a good lesson for anyone listening right now. How often do we let the fear of failing stop us from going after what we want?
It's a good question for all of us to consider. How do we view failure in our own lives? Is it something to avoid at all costs, or is it a chance to learn and grow? It seems like Rowling's journey definitely points to the second option.
So anyway, fast forward a bit, and the book that almost never got published becomes this massive global hit, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone takes off, and the next 6 books just cement its place in literary history.
It's just incredible how successful it became. The books were translated into more than 80 languages and sold over 500 million copies. It's hard to wrap your head around those numbers. It shows that the themes in her books, like friendship, courage, good versus evil, are universal. They connect with people from all different backgrounds and ages.
And it wasn't just the books. It became this huge media empire with movies, theme parks, and merchandise. Rowling went from being on government assistance to being a global icon, though she did clarify later that she's not actually a billionaire.
If you think about it, it really shows the power of a single creative vision when it's combined with hard work and determination. It's an amazing example of how dedication to your craft, even when things are tough, can lead to something truly extraordinary.
But it's not all about personal success, is it? From pretty early on in her career, Rowling has been dedicated to giving back. She started Lumos, a charity that helps disadvantaged kids all over the world.
What's really impressive is that she didn't wait until she was super rich and famous to start giving back. Both the biography and the interview talk about how philanthropy was important to her from the beginning. The Volant Charitable Trust, which she started in 2000, focuses on fighting poverty and social inequality and even supports research for MS, the disease that affected her mother.
She supported so many different causes, from medical research to women's rights and poverty relief. She's used her platform to advocate for personal empowerment and gender equality.
It adds another dimension to her story, doesn't it? It shows that her success isn't just about money and fame, it's about making a positive impact on the world. The Empower Your English episode talked about the importance of gratitude and giving back as key parts of her journey.
And speaking of Empower Your English, they highlighted some really important vocabulary that relates to Rowling's story. First up, resilience, which means being able to bounce back from tough times, like Rowling did with all the rejections and personal struggles. It's like being able to bend without breaking.
Right. And then there's perseverance, which means sticking with something even when it's hard. Her dedication to writing, even when she was struggling financially and facing all those rejections from publishers, is a great example of perseverance. It's about not giving up on what you believe in.
And then we have gratitude, which is about being thankful and showing appreciation. All the work she does for charity really shows her gratitude. It's like she understands how lucky she is and wants to share that with others.
And finally, there's grit, which is a combination of passion and perseverance for reaching long-term goals. Dr. Angela Duckworth, who is mentioned in the Empower Your English episode, talks about grit a lot, and it fits perfectly with Rowling's story. She never gave up on her dream, even when it seemed impossible. And there's a University of Pennsylvania study that showed a link between grit and success. So it's definitely an important quality to have.
Now let's get into some of the interesting details from the interview transcript. It really gave a more personal look at her life. For example, her parents actually met on a train from King's Cross Station. Isn't that kind of cool?
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of magic right from the start.
It's almost too perfect, right? And then there are her early influences, like The Wind in the Willows and Richard Scarry books. It makes you wonder if those imaginative worlds had an impact on her as a writer. What do you think about those early reading experiences? Do they shape a writer?
I think they're super important. They spark that love for stories and help you understand how characters and worlds work. And she wrote her first story when she was just 6 years old. It was about a rabbit named Rabbit who had the measles.
That's so cute.
And there's even a suggestion that her headmaster, Alfred Dunn, might have been the inspiration for Dumbledore. It's those little connections that make the wizarding world feel even more real.
Absolutely. It connects it back to her own life. And the interview also says that Hermione was kind of based on Rowling herself when she was 11. She called it a caricature of herself. That's pretty funny, and it makes you see Hermione in a new light.
The interview also talks about her difficult relationship with her dad and how she listened to alternative rock music like the Smiths and the Clash during her tough teenage years. And her best friend had a turquoise Ford Anglia, which is what inspired the Weasley family's flying car. It's those little details that make the story so much richer and more relatable.
Those details give you a peek into her life and the things that shaped her as a writer. The ups and downs of family life, the close friendships. Those are the experiences that feed into the themes of belonging, loyalty, and resilience that are so important in the Harry Potter books.
And get this, she actually got rejected from Oxford University.
Hmm.
It just goes to show that sometimes what feels like a huge failure can actually lead to something better. Do you think that rejection had anything to do with her later success?
Maybe. Sometimes when one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
Right? Her time in Paris and her work at Amnesty International, where she documented human rights abuses in French-speaking Africa, definitely broadened her horizons and made her more empathetic. And that probably influenced her writing in ways we don't even realize.
And then, of course, there's that famous train ride in 1990 when the idea for Harry Potter just came to her out of nowhere. It's almost unbelievable, right? And she didn't even have a pen with her. She just sat there for 4 hours letting it all play out in her head. It shows how powerful inspiration can be.
It's a reminder to be open to those bursts of inspiration when they hit. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just let the ideas flow without trying to force them onto the page. The interview talks about how vivid and detailed those initial characters and plot points were in her mind.
Not long after that, her mom passed away, and you could really see how that loss affected the way she wrote about loss in the books, especially Harry's longing for his parents. That kind of raw emotion really connects with readers on a deep level.
It shows that our deepest personal experiences, even the painful ones, can become fuel for our creativity. It's interesting to know that the Mirror of Her Eyes was inspired by her grief over losing her mother. It adds a whole new layer of meaning to that object in the books.
She was living in Porto teaching English while trying to write, going through a rough first marriage, and even experiencing domestic abuse. It was a really difficult time for her. And she's been open about her struggles with depression and getting therapy. It takes a lot of strength to talk about those things.
It's an important reminder that success doesn't happen overnight, and it's rarely a smooth ride. Everyone goes through challenges, even the most successful people. Her willingness to talk about her struggles makes her story even more relatable.
And here's something I found really powerful. She said that her failure during that time actually helped her to create the Dementors, those scary soul-sucking creatures. That's a great example of taking something dark and painful and turning it into something creative and impactful.
Turning pain into art is something that a lot of great artists do, and the Dementors, which are symbols of despair that came from her own depression, are such a strong and memorable part of the Harry Potter world.
It's pretty crazy to think that she was living on government assistance while she was finishing her first book. It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
And then there's a story about Alice Newton, the editor's daughter, who convinced Bloomsbury to publish the book. It was a kid's pure love for the story that made the difference. It makes you think about how powerful those genuine connections with the story can be.
It shows that sometimes the best feedback comes from unexpected places. And even after they agreed to publish, they still told her to keep her day job. It's hard to believe that now, considering how successful the books became.
And then there's the fact that she added the K for Kathleen to her name on the cover, probably to make it sound more appealing to boys. It shows how the publishing world worked back then.
And then slowly but surely, she started getting awards and recognition, and Scholastic bought the U.S. rights for a good chunk of money. That must have been a huge turning point for her, going from struggling to finally getting recognition.
Those were the moments when things started to turn around for her. After years of hard work and rejection, she was finally getting the validation and success she deserved. That deal with Scholastic must have been a big deal, not just for the financial security, but also for the recognition of her work. And she was really adamant about having a mostly British cast and crew for the movies, which was a bold move. And she continued her charity work through the Volant Charitable Trust and her partnership with Comic Relief. It's clear that her values were still important to her, even as she became more and more famous.
It shows her integrity as an artist, that she wanted to keep creative control and support her local industry. And the amount of money she's given to charity, even auctioning off the Tales of Beetle the Bard for millions of pounds, shows how committed she is to using her success to help others.
I thought it was interesting that she denied being a billion-dollar author in an interview. It's a pretty humble thing to do, considering how successful she is. And then she founded the Children's High-Level Group, which later became Lumos, to focus on children's rights and well-being.
It shows that she's not just focused on her own wealth and fame. She genuinely wants to make a difference in the world. Her work with Lumos, which aims to end the institutionalization of children, is a really important and lasting contribution.
And later on, she decided to write adult fiction under the name Robert Galbraith. It must have been an interesting experiment. And then once her real identity was revealed, the book started selling like crazy.
I think she wanted to see if her writing could stand on its own without the J.K. Rowling name attached to it.
Yeah.
The success she had as Robert Galbraith probably gave her a different kind of satisfaction and allowed her to connect with readers in a new way.
And during the COVID-19 pandemic, she released the Ichabod online for free for kids, which was really generous of her. And then she wrote The Christmas Pig to continue her work in children's literature. It shows that she's still engaged with her readers and always looking for new ways to connect with them.
It shows her commitment to her audience and her willingness to use her platform to bring joy and encourage reading, especially during a tough time for a lot of families.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into J.K. Rowling's life, what are the key takeaways? For me, it's about never giving up even when things seem impossible. It's It's about being resilient, bouncing back from tragedy and hardship and all those early rejections. And it's about believing in yourself and your vision, even when others doubt you.
It's a powerful reminder that failure isn't the end. It's often just a stepping stone to something greater. Rowling's story shows us that those no's can eventually lead to a really big yes.
So I want you to think about your own life. What are some of the challenges you're facing? What rejections have you experienced that are still bothering you? Maybe you can try to see them differently, not as dead ends, but as detours that might lead you to something amazing.
And here's a final thought for you to ponder. What kind of magic might be hidden within your own struggles, just waiting to be unlocked, with the same determination that J.K. Rowling had? How can you turn your rejections into the foundation for future success? It's something worth thinking about.